Hello everyone, my name is Electoli and thank you for joining me again at Edufy for more lessons on grammar. So today we're going to talk about and continue from the very topic that we discussed yesterday, that is subject and verb agreement, and that is the topic of compound subject. So when I say compound subject, what does this mean? Compound subjects are more than one subjects that are joined by compound words such as conjunctions, prepositions, and even uh, pronouns as well. So what do we do? What type of verbs do we use when we have compound subjects? That is the topic that we're going to discuss today. So let's go on. So first we have to see what do we do when the subjects are joined by the word and. And that is sometimes two or more subjects are linked by the words and that is how we have to deal with the verb as well. That means when we have this type of compound subjects, linked subjects, we will have to use a plural verb. That is the rule when we look at subject and verb agreement of compound sentences. So let's take a look at the example here. A bicycle and a pedestrian were involved. So here I'm talking about an accident, an incident that has happened, where we have a bicycle and a pedestrian. Two subjects, that is one subject and two subjects, joined by the word and. Whenever we have two subjects joined by the word and, we will directly write the verb in the plural form. Use a plural verb. We can see the similar example in the next sentence. The goose and the chicken dash early in the morning. What do we write? Eat in the morning. It is the plural form of the verb. So we're looking at the goose, which is the first subject, and the chickens, which is the second subject. Both of them are being joined by the word and. So according to this rule, whenever subjects are linked with the word and, we will use a plural verb. That should be clear in our head. Now, when we look at that, that means we also have to look at this. That is the basic rule that whenever we have compound subjects, two subjects joined by the word and, we use the plural verb. But there is an exception to that rule. That means there is one way that you can escape this rule. And what is that rule? When the two nouns don't refer to separate things but to one single entity, we use a singular verb. The new bed and breakfast opens this week. What does this mean? Whenever we see this, the new bed and breakfast. So if I look at bed and breakfast, they can be considered as two separate subjects joined by the word and. But here I have written a singular verb. And why is that? It is because of that exception of the rule. Exception of the rule states that whenever the two nouns are referring to single entity. So in this sentence, bed and breakfast does not mean separate things, but rather it means one thing. So when I say bed and breakfast, it means some kind of home vacation stay, some kind of hotel, right? Some kind of hostel. So this is not referring to separate things, but rather one particular thing. So whenever I'm talking about two separate things, but then if it's joined by and, I use plural verb, right? But since this one is being joined, but it is referring to one single thing, so therefore the verb will be singular. Opens refers to bed and breakfast, since bed and breakfast refers to one thing, even though it is joined by the word and. So in the next sentence, you can get a clear example. Macaroni and cheese is a delicious meal. Macaroni, one subject, cheese, another subject. Two subjects joined by the word and. So according to the rule, you must write a plural verb, but here there is an exception. And what is that exception? I'm using these two subjects, I'm referring to one single thing. That is macaroni and cheese as a meal. That means one entity. So therefore, what will I write? The singular verb will come here. Why? Because macaroni and cheese is a delicious meal. Is a single meal. whenever we use this. For example, if I say bread and butter dash our breakfast, when you eat your breakfast and you eat your bread and butter, you don't eat them separately. You eat them together as one entity, as a breakfast. So what do? Bread and butter is my breakfast or our breakfast. So here again the verb is directly related to the subject, and even though I have used two subjects, it is pointing out towards one entity, single entity. So therefore the verb will also become singular. That is the first rule when we have subject compound sentences joined by the word and. Okay, when it is joined by the word and, you just consider them as plural, but if it is pointing towards a singular thing, then you will write as a singular verb. There's also another rule, and that is whenever you have the usage of articles, if it's pointing towards two things, then you will use a plural verb. That means, for example, my friend and architect. My friend and architect dash come. So here I can write has or have. Now why do I write has? In this sentence I will have to write has, which is a singular verb. Why did I write has? Because my friend is also an architect. So even though friend and architect is used here, by using the word and, I am going to use the singular verb has. However, if this one, in this portion, I have written my friend and an architect, then I'm pointing towards two different people now. So what has happened? With the addition of an article, I have separated these two things. So what will happen? The verb will also become plural again. That is the rule when we talk about compound subjects. Now what do we do when we have subjects that are linked with the word or? That means options, when we have optional subjects in a sentence. So when we talk about options, that means either or can also be written, neither nor, not only, but also. That means giving us options within the sentence. When you have those subjects joined by these type of words, you will use a singular verb. That is, you have to remember this. Whenever I say use singular verb, that means if both the subjects are joined by the word or, that means giving you options, and both of the subjects are singular, then you will write the verb as singular. Just a card or a balloon is enough. A card is singular, balloon is also singular. Two subjects joined by the word or. But since both of them are singular, so therefore your verb will also be singular. And again, same thing if you move on to the next sentence, either the measurement or the calculation. This is the second subject, this is the first subject. Both of these subjects are singular, right? Joined by what? Either and or. Whenever you have this, the verb will again be singular. Now, if you go to the next sentence, subjects are plural, right? That means if both the subjects joined by either or neither nor, all of this are joined and then they are plural, then that means you will have to use a plural verb. For example, either the measurements, so now measurements has become plural. In this sentence it was singular, in this sentence now it has become plural, right? So again, when you move on, either the measurements or the calculations have created a problem. What has changed now? The verb has changed from has to have. Why did that change? Because now the subjects joined by either or have become plural. So remember this point, when a subject is linked with or, either or, neither nor, and both the subjects are singular, then the verb will also be singular. If both the subjects are plural, joined by either or, neither nor, or, then you will use the plural verb. Now, with this rule again, we have another exception. That is, if the compound sentences are, let's just take a look at this one. Exception is that if the compound subject contains both singular and plural nouns. Now, what do you do? Earlier on in the rule, you said, if I had a singular subject, you'll have to use a singular verb. If you had a plural subject, you had to use a plural verb. But now in this exception, it is saying that what will you do if the sentence has one singular subject and one plural subject? In that case, there is this rule that you will have to write the verb according to the nearest or the closest subject. That means whichever subject is nearest to the verb, you will have to write the verb according to that subject. If the subject that is nearest to the verb is plural, then you'll have to write a plural verb. If the subject closest to the verb is a singular subject, then you'll have to write a singular verb. Let's take an example of this one. Neither the batteries nor the machine operates as intended. Operates is the verb here. Now, what is this verb? This is a singular verb. Now, if I said, according to the earlier rules, we have two subjects, that is the batteries and the machine. The batteries is plural, the machine is singular. So it's quite different from the earlier examples, right? Why is that? Because we have one plural, one singular. And it is joined by neither and nor. So when this happens, that means you will have to join the sentence by using the verb singular verb. Why? Because the machine here, which is closest to the verb, is singular. If the sentence had battery nor the machines. Now what has it become? This one has become singular, this one has become plural, right? So what will I do? This one, I will take the S out. Neither the battery nor the machines operate as intended. Why did I change the verb? Because the nearest subject has changed to plural. Therefore, the verb also becomes plural. And this is in the case when the sentence has two different subjects, that is singular and plural subjects. Okay? That is the exception to that rule. Let's move on to the next topic, that is subject separated from the verbs. Now, whenever we have sentences, especially long sentences or idioms and phrases, we will find that the subjects are quite separated from the verbs. That means in the earlier on examples, we find that the subjects were close to the verb, and that is how we determine the verb, whether to write singular or plural, right? But here in this type of sentences, we will often find that the verbs are separated from the subjects. That is where your ability to understand the subject of the sentence becomes handy. That means you have to identify the main subject in a sentence. So, for example, in this one, critics of the study highlights its errors. In this sentence, a lot of people might understand the study as the subject, right? But then if you look closely at the sentence, we are not talking about the study, rather we are talking about the critics. And what do? They highlight. So therefore, this becomes the subject and this one becomes the verb. So what is the error here in this sentence? If you can find it, you will find that whenever we have a clear subject, we will have to write a clear verb here. That means not focusing on the other parts of the sentence. Okay? And when you look at this highlights is not coming near critics at all. It is at the end of the sentence, right? So that means you will always have to identify. There will not be any direct connection with the subject. You will have to find the connection by yourself and accordingly write the verb. So the word critics, is it plural? Yes, right? So what is it? It cannot be singular, it should be plural in nature. So if you look here in the correct form, critics of the study highlight its errors. That is the correct answer. If we look at a basket of puppies were in the kitchen, Sometimes students get confused with this one thing. Puppies, right? The minute you see puppies, we think that this is the subject, right? But then if you look at the sentence closely, we're not talking about the puppies, but rather we're talking about a basket of puppies. So therefore, a basket is the subject here. So in that case, a basket means singular. So verb will also be singular. A basket of puppies was in the kitchen. An example of the very thing that I was talking about, of the very sentence, that is long sentences where the verb is not remotely near to the subject. 12 organizations, each of which is an expert in its field and a key stakeholder in the negotiation process, is participating in the conference. Now, here is the verb, right? But how do you connect it? Since it's not very near to the subject, a lot of students may get confused, which is the reason why you have to understand what are we talking about or who are we talking about in a sentence. And that is how you will identify the subject. In this sentence, I am not talking about an expert. I'm not talking about the field. I'm not talking even about the stakeholders. I'm talking about who? The 12 organizations. These 12 organizations, I'm talking about them. So therefore, what is this? It's a plural subject. Therefore, the verb will also become plural. Based on what? On the main subject, that is organizations. This is how we talk about when we use compound subjects, when it is joined by and, when it is joined by or, what is the rule, what is the exception. If you remember all of these points that we have discussed till now, it will be very easy for you to write a grammatically correct sentence. For such interesting topics, I would want you to continue following this for more contents. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.